We're getting into Dynasty startup season again, so I've got 5 tips that I use during my Dynasty startups to get a leg ahead on my league mates. Now, if you're looking to join a Dynasty startup or just take over an orphan team, join our Discord. It is in the description of this video. We have a channel where people can post their orphan spots or start up their own Dynasty leagues. And in the next few days, we will be announcing the start of Boom Bust 10, our 10th listener, follower, subscriber, whatever you want to call it, league. And that'll be starting very soon. So get in there. The announcement will happen there because that's where I can control that everyone sees it. Enough of the intro. Let's get into tip number 1 in your Dynasty startups. Use your site's mock draft tools. Now, this might seem obvious. Slow down. I know it's a little bit more than that. And this is the trick that I tell people who are new to Dynasty startups. When you join one of our leagues, they're cheap to enter. And I'm not looking to create an atmosphere where I provide a bunch of information and then pull people in and dupe them and try to outbeat them. I'm here to help. I'm here to teach. So one of the things that I tell people to do if it's their first Dynasty startup league is take their site's mock draft tool and just run it. Run it 2-3 times and save those images so that you can see where players are getting picked. And when people send you trades, you can start to break down, well, what is the 15th round pick worth? What is my 10th round pick worth? Well, here's a real screenshot of players that are going in that range. So you can do that with your mock draft tools. You can also do that through a website called Dynasty Data Lab. They have startup ADP where you can just go and see on average in past startups, where are players getting drafted? So if someone says, I'll give you my 10th round pick, 11th round pick for your 5th, you can start to put names to those players and say, the 5th is probably worth more. Anytime we have a question that we're trying to answer and it seems a little bit overwhelming, it helps to break it into chunks. So instead of saying, what's a 10th round pick worth? What's a 12th round pick worth? We can start to say, oh, I know what that player is worth. And now I can start to factor that into my trade value assessment. With that said, let's move on to tip number 2, and that's abusing trade calculators. A lot of people in your Dynasty startup will use a site like Keep Trade Cut. And I think that site does have value for Dynasty Fantasy Football, but the main tool being used there, the trade calculator, I think it has a lot of flaws, and I want to be the one abusing those flaws in trades. And this is true for a lot of the fantasy calculators that I've seen for Dynasty, for Redraft. They are not perfect, and there are certain types of trades where it probably should just say, hey, don't do this at all. But instead, it tries to calculate every trade as though it could become fair. The main issue is that trades should have a requirement of tier matching in your mind. And what does that mean? Now, it's not that deep of a concept, and I think I can explain it pretty clearly, so stick with me. In a hypothetical deal, if I'm sending Drake London away, there's no realistic number of second-round picks that I'm getting back on the other side that's going to make it even for me. What I mean is, if you go to Keep Trade Cut right now and you put Drake London on one side of a trade or your favorite trade calculator and 4 second-round picks on the other side, it's going to say they're even, that it's a fair trade. But I'm never sending Drake London for 4 second-round picks because I'm taking Drake London that's 95% good quality value, and I'm trading it for a mess of second-round picks that's about 80% miss rate. Now, you could take those second-round picks and trade them for other players, but for second-round picks, the players that you're getting back in trades are just not going to get you back to Drake London. So when we're looking at trades, I want to be the one adding junk on my side of the deal, second-round picks, third-round picks, so that the other player in my league eventually adds a first onto their side. If this is getting a little confusing, the short way of saying this is I don't want second-round picks back in a trade unless I can break that trade into smaller chunks where it seems pretty clear that I'm sending a player for a second-round pick and that value lines up. So for example, if I'm trading away Drake London and David Montgomery and getting back Devon Achane and the 202, I can break that trade down and say, okay, Achane and London are within the same range. We might like one guy more than the other, but then David Montgomery and the 202 are within range and we might like one guy more than the other. But what we've got here is really 2 different trades, the higher tier assets and the lower tier assets, and they do kind of line up. And in that situation, I'm trading a player for a value that they're about worth, a second round pick. I don't want people adding on second round picks to make the trade calculator light up and say, well, now it's fair. Because second round picks usually miss. And I think in general, they're heavily overvalued. And I want to be the player sending away my 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th round pick to make the trade calculator light up. If you want to see a video going deeper into depth on trading concepts like this, let me know and we can release that one in a future one. Let's talk tip number 3. I've seen a lot of people give their dynasty startup tips and they say, don't trade out of the first round. That's your cornerstone asset to build around and you can't replace these guys. And I'm going to give you the counterpoint. If you do it right, you can get a massive value win by trading back out of the first round. The thing that dynasty managers aren't considering is that players in the second and third round of your startup are also very likely to be excellent cornerstone assets for your team. And if you can get more of them, you can come out way ahead. Years ago, I did a startup where I had the 101 and people were telling me Patrick Mahomes is going to be excellent for the next 10 years. Now, I don't ever really try to plot out the next 10 years for my dynasty team. I don't try to plot out the next 5 years. I'm looking at the next 1 to 2. So for each player, I'm saying what's a realistic production profile that they can have in the next 1 to 2 years. And then at the end of that, what's their value going to be like? Can I trade them after 2 years? Can I trade them after 1 year? Dynasty is a very long range game. You have players for their entire career, but I'm really only thinking 1 to 2 to maybe 3 years in the future because we don't actually know what's going to happen. We'll cover that more in another tip. But when someone was telling me Mahomes is going to be the top quarterback for the next 10 years, nope, he has not been. So my goal in trading in startups is to get as many second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth round picks that I can. Players that are very likely to give you good production and hold good value going forward. Now you can pull up mock drafts, and this video will be good for any year. You can pull up mock drafts and ADP. We're looking for players that we could very likely trade for a first, and that kind of cuts off around the 7th to 8th round in startups typically. So when I'm trading away my first round pick, I do want to be following one of my main rules for trading away studs. I do not want to split this asset very much. If I'm trading away, say, Jahmyr Gibbs, I want a great running back or a great wide receiver and a first round pick. I want to take this one thing and split it into 2 things that should for sure go up in value. Now, it's possible that a player that I get in won't go up in value, but we hedge that by bringing in a future first round pick that will continue to go up in value. So you can get another great player and a first round pick. Or if we're doing this in dynasty startups, I will split it down to 2 great players. But in those situations, you usually need to add in some extra value on top coming from your 12th, 13th, and 14th round picks, like we talked about before, adding in junk to make the trade calculator light up so that you can get more cornerstone assets. The simple way that I describe this is if I'm trading away the best player in the deal, I also want to be getting great value on the worst player in the deal. So when we're sending our 14th round pick to get a second and a third, our first and 14th to get a second and a third, you can come out way ahead. It'll make the trade calculator light up like, ooh, this is fair. But you're actually getting ahead because you're adding in multiple cornerstones and trading away picks that will likely just become dust on someone's roster. Let's expand on this in the next tip, and that's count your starters. Now, if you're playing in a league with us, we use this format. And if you're watching our videos, this is also the format that we use for trade values. 12 team, start 10, super flex, with a full point PPR and an extra half point on top for tight ends as a premium. So running backs get a point per catch, wide receivers get a point for their catch, tight ends get 1.5. And what I want to be doing in my startup draft is if we need to start 10 players, I want to be looking at the draft board and saying, well, I got to get to 10 starters, probably 11 or 12 with bye weeks and injuries. And the players that we're looking at in rounds 11, 12, 13, they're not really guys that I want to be relying on. When we get into our year, I don't want to be losing weeks because I had to start Quentin Johnston and Ramondre Stevenson because of bye weeks and injuries. So as much as I can during my dynasty startups, I want to be building out a strong starting roster. And that is how I think about it as I'm making trades. So if I'm trading out of the first round, like we talked about, I'm adding in probably another starter for this year to make my lineup stronger. And if I need to move picks from rounds 12, 13, 14 to get up into rounds 7, 6, and 5 to add in more valuable starters, That is what I'm looking to do. I want to consolidate all of my value to maximize how many starters or how many good starters I can have in my lineup, rather than hoping on dart throws in rounds 12, 13, 14, and so on. Tip number 5 that we have today is, and this is the most important one, we don't plan to punt in the draft. You could rephrase this and say, contend in year 1. You could rephrase this in general in Dynasty and say, try to contend every year. Because the reality of this is, and the thing that people miss in Dynasty fantasy football and redraft fantasy football, the thing that I could tell every player to make them a better player would be, we don't actually know what's going to happen. We don't actually know what's going to happen. So when you're looking at your team as you're drafting and going, I can't compete in year 1, or this guy's team is stacked, there's no way we're going to beat them. Just remember, last year, the range of outcomes that people had for Brian Thomas Jr. was he could become the best wide receiver, or he could take a small step back and still be a very good wide receiver. Wrong. He was hurt and he was not good, and he doesn't have a lot of value right now. Now, he could bounce back. That is in the realistic range of outcomes. Last year, people were saying Sam Darnold to the Seahawks, and then their passing game doesn't really look that promising. I liked JSN with other options. I kind of wish they would have drafted someone. He's a third-year player who hasn't done it yet. The range of outcomes was maybe he could break out, but he's probably not top 12. Wrong. He's one of the best assets in Dynasty right now. We don't actually know what's going to happen. So when you're making your team, you want to add in flexibility. Because we don't know how the season is actually going to go, in my startups, I am planning to contend. I will bring in a mix of young players. I will bring in a mix of productive veterans who usually end up lasting longer than people think. And I want my team contending. Now, I will play the market in my draft. If people are selling their future picks for extra cheap, I will acquire those future picks, future firsts especially, because I know that by the time we get to weeks 3 and 4, the whole league is going to feel pretty differently about their teams, and they're going to start going from draft value and startup draft value and start looking at just regular dynasty value. And the picks that I got for cheap in the draft will become more valuable, and I could trade them for players to contend in that year. So any move that I'm making in my dynasty startup, I want to be thinking in terms of, can this help me contend this year? Right now in March, your future, a 27 first doesn't help you contend. But when we get to late September, you can trade that future first to get a player that helps you contend in your first year. So I want to be open to all sorts of deals, but I want to keep it within the mindset of, how does this help me contend in year 1? If you want to see more tips for startup drafts, this is just 5 of them. There are more that I have. Let me know in the comments and we can do an extended video or another video including them. If you wanted to see a video just about trades in general in Dynasty, let me know and I can give you my trade tips and how I build trades in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And if you're looking for how recent news affects veteran players, we have a video of that covering news coming out of NFL Combine Week. That one will be linked on your screen somewhere around one of these hands. I'm just out here throwing hands, and it will be linked somewhere. You can click on that one. Thank you very much for making it to the end, and we will see you in the next one.